I was no Marie Antoinette.
Even as millions of their people lived in poverty, the Marcoses enjoyed the good life.
To the very end, he could not believe America could do this to him.
Imelda Marcos, the former First Lady of the Philippines, who is known as the Steel Butterfly or the Iron Butterfly, is a name that evokes images of opulence, power, and controversy. From her 3,000 pairs of shoes to her delusions of grandeur and loyal supporters, Imelda is still a name that continues to interest people all over the world. The Marcoses had a lot of stolen wealth, and Imelda Marcos was famous for spending it, with some accounts calling her the ultimate personification of conspicuous consumption. On one occasion, Imelda spent $2,000 on chewing gum at the San Francisco International Airport, and on another, she forced a plane to do a U-turn mid-air because she had forgotten to buy cheese in Rome. Marcos has also said in interviews that if you know how rich you are not rich enough. But me, I am not aware of the extent of my wealth. That's how rich we are, end quote. The amount the Marcoses were estimated to have plundered from the Philippines is so large that it has been the subject of world records. Imelda Marcos, together with her husband Ferdinand, who is considered by many to be one of the greatest plunderers in history, according to the Washington Post, were jointly credited in 1989 by Guinness World Records with the largest ever theft from a government, an estimated $5 billion to $10 billion. She is quoted as having stated, and I quote, "We practically own everything in the Philippines, from electricity, telecommunications, airlines, banking, beer and tobacco, newspapers, publishings, television stations, shipping oil, and mining, hotels and beach resorts, down to coconut milling, small farms, real estate, and insurance," end quote. In 2009, Imelda Marcos was listed by Newsweek as being one of the greediest people of all time. To this, Marcos replied, "I plead guilty. For me, greedy is giving. I was First Lady for 20 years. You have to be greedy first to give to all. It is natural. The only thing we keep in life are those we give away," end quote. Today, she has a large audience, even if you go on her social medias or her children's social medias, etc. It's just crazy to me how people still support her. But in spite of all that did happen in the Philippines, the Filipino people, majority of them remember a time in an era where things were very disciplined and orderly and the streets were a little bit cleaner. And there was progress in the Philippines when the Marcoses were in charge. It kind of reminded me of my Dragon Lady video, if you haven't seen, with the dictator's baby duck and his wife in Haiti, where, you know, I have special interest in that as a Haitian. Imelda Marcos definitely reminds me of our Dragon Lady from Haiti, so I'll pin that in the comments if you haven't seen it. We're going to break down this video more, but first, hey friend, welcome to my channel, Karinealourde, where we break down and deep dive the most iconic stars through history. If you're not yet subscribed, please be sure to do so, and if you're already subscribed, please turn on your notification bell so you never miss an upload. Now, without further ado, let's get into this video. Let's start with her childhood, of course. Imelda was born on July 2nd, 1929 in Manila. Born into the Romualdez political dynasty from the province of Leyte, Imelda grew up in a wealthy clan of devout Catholics. Her parents were Vicente Orestes Romualdez, a lawyer, and his second wife, Maria Trinidad. Imelda is the sixth of Vincent's 11 children and Remedio's firstborn. Her paternal great-grandfather is Fray Francisco Miguel Lopez Silgado, a Spanish friar and silversmith from Granada, Andalusia, who became the parish priest of Pandacan in Manila. She was baptized in a nearby San Miguel church on the day after her birth. She also had an uncle who was a Supreme Court Associate Justice, and her younger brother served as governor of Leyte. Imelda Romualdez came into the world during a tumultuous time in Philippines history. At the time of her birth, the Romualdezes were wealthy, and around 1932, the financial conditions of Imelda's family began to decline. Imelda's parents were separated for a time, during which Imelda's mother worked for the nuns at the Asilo de San Vincent de Paul. Her parents eventually reconciled, but to avoid further conflict, she and her children, including Imelda, moved to their house's garage. Her mother's health began to fail, and she died on April 7th, 1938, due to double pneumonia. She was the youngest of 6 children in a family that valued education and ambition. In November 1938, Imelda's father gave up Manila due to his declining fortunes and his law practice and returned to Tacloban, where he could support his family with a simpler lifestyle.
My mother, she died 1938. She was 36 years old. When my mother died when I was 8, I was brought here with the whole family by my father. I was some kind of a freak because we were just new in town. We were a novelty.
Imelda's childhood was colored by a mix of resilience and aspiration. Her father, a lawyer, and her mother, a school teacher, instilled in her the importance of education. Imelda finished grade 1 at the nearby College of the Holy Spirit, Manila, where her older half-sister also studied. She continued her early studies at Holy Infant Academy. At school, Imelda had to face her family's humiliating poverty, and she was frequently among the students who had to apologize for late payments. But a lot of people say, with Imelda, it's like her life was embellished a lot, and a lot of people don't believe she was, in fact, she grew up in poverty at all. But it was a story that was sold to the people to kind of get the people to sympathize with her a little bit more. But she grew up from wealth. So the opposition always speak against her whole life, actually, was a lie. We see that with a lot of presidents. There's a lot of propaganda and lies with their life. So do with that as you will. But the propaganda argued with it and was like, she grew up wealthy. And then she does show you her childhood home, which is kind of like now a shrine, which was in the middle of all these other poor homes. It would not have been a good look for the First Lady to have been that rich in a country where everyone is kind of struggling.
This was the Romualdez home where I practically grew up.
It sort of has this dual purpose. It's a shrine to both Imelda and Jesus at the same time. One of its main features is 18 dioramas describing Imelda's version of her own life, with each diorama showing a chapter.
That is Santo Niño, and that is made of ivory from Italy. The one here is made of leather, Italian leather. And this is Imelda's room.
I know it's sticking out like a sore thumb in that area with little houses beside it. But I wanted to show them, look, Imelda made it. If Imelda made it, everybody can make it. Look at this age and stage. I feel so good. I'm still ready to fly.
Comment below, what are your thoughts? Now, Imelda ran for president of the Student Council at St. Paul's College, now named Divine Word University, in 1951. While an undergraduate student, Marcos taught at a local Chinese high school before graduating in 1952. She had won a scholarship to study music at the Philippines Women's University under Adoracion Reyes, a close friend of the family. Imelda returned to Manila in 1952 and stayed in the house of her relative, House of Representatives of the Philippines Speaker pro tempore, Daniel Romualdez, who had 3 adopted children. Imelda's status in the Romualdez household during this time has been described as higher than servants and lower than family members as a poor relative. Imelda found work as a salesgirl in a store called P.E. Domingo, which infuriated her father when he learned of it during one of his visits, perceiving it as an ill treatment of Imelda because they were too wealthy for her to get a real job, Despite these challenges, she managed to cultivate an image of glamour and sophistication, a trait that would later help her capture the heart of one of the Philippines' most powerful politicians. Imelda also joined the 1953 Miss Manila beauty pageant. The results became controversial, resulting in both Imelda and Miss Norma being declared Manila's candidate to the larger Miss Philippines pageant. And this is how influential she was when she was allegedly losing real bad. Her family, she spoke up, and her family had so much power they went to contest it and then kind of, give her some title to appease her.
We put up a Miss Philippines contest, and of course we looked around for beauties from all provinces. She represented Manila, and in the final day, Miss Romualdez, then she was not yet Mrs. Marcos, ran as second runner. She was not contented with the decision of the judges. She went to approach Mayor Lacson to question the result. I think to appease Miss Romualdez, Mayor Lacson appointed her to be the muse of Manila.
They wanted to make a movie star of her, but in the meantime, she met Marcos.
So in the late 1950s, Imelda's life took a dramatic turn when she met Ferdinand Marcos, a rising star in Philippine politics, at a party in Manila. Ferdinand was a member of the Philippine House of Representatives and was known for his charisma and ambition. Imelda and Ferdinand Marcos met on April 6, 1954, during a budget hearing at the Philippine Congress. Ferdinand was part of the opposition team who led the argument against the budget, while Imelda was there to visit her cousin Daniel, who was the Speaker of the House. During a recess, Imelda caught Ferdinand's eyes, and he asked his journalist friend Jose Guevara of the Manila Times to introduce him to Imelda. At that time, Ferdinand already knew of Imelda. Imelda, on the other hand, knew very little of Ferdinand Marcos. After comparing heights and confirming that he was at least an inch taller than her, Ferdinand sought the help of Guevara to pursue Imelda in marriage. This whirlwind courtship lasted only 11 days, so they married after 11 days. On April 16, 1954, on Good Friday, after having been jokingly asked by Guevara if she wanted to be the first lady of the land someday, Imelda finally agreed to sign it. On April 17, 1954, Ferdinand and Imelda were secretly married by a reluctant Francisco Chanco, a judge befriended by Ferdinand who lived in the area. The church wedding followed only after receiving the blessing of her father, which Ferdinand asked via telegram on Easter Sunday. Their wedding was held on May 1st, 1954, at the San Miguel Pro Cathedral in Manila, where Imelda was christened. A lot of people say it was a marriage of convenience and it was set up. The marriage meant that Ferdinand's common-law wife, Carmen Ortega of La Union's Ortega political clan, which it's really hard to find anything on her, with whom he had already had 3 children with, had to be quietly removed from the public eye. Not much is known about what happened to Ortega and their children. Marcos' 4th child with Ortega was born after his marriage to Imelda. So Marcos and Imelda later adopted a daughter, Amy, who many speculate was Carmen Ortega's 4th child. So rumor had it that Imelda and Ferdinand's marriage was just for politics and not love. It is normal for things like this to happen in politics. You marry someone who is high-bred and would make a great first lady, but behind the scenes you have the real love of your life who remains a secret, kind of like Scandal with Olivia Pope and Fitz.
She married somebody she had met 11 days before. One of the things that really attracted me to him was the many guys that had courted me. I have never seen anybody who was more in love with me than this guy. He could not take his eyes off me. He could not eat. He could not drink.
He knew that it would enhance his public image to have this stunningly beautiful woman beside him. Imelda belonged to the Romualdez clan, a very powerful political family.
Aside from the fact, of course, that my cousin was the Speaker of the House, he said, this guy is a future president. Whoever will not marry this guy is stupid.
I don't think she liked the idea that he had other women.
Kumisan alam niya, kumisan siguro, nagagalit din siya. She was a wife also. Pilyo talaga, pilyo, pero sa lahat ng never had a mistress. You know what I mean by mistress? Yung kept, ganyan, ganito, hindi. Never. Hindi siya ganun eh. Madaming good time, pero hindi mistress. I don't know, hindi ko na alam yung behind the doors.
It's a matter of change of attitude. I said, how lucky I am that people come to my home. How lucky I am that I am the one giving rather than I asking for help.
Ferdinand Marcos was also known to have numerous affairs on Imelda, so the love story they tried to sell the media was actually a lie. He had an affair with American actress Dovie Beams from 1968 to 1970. On many occasions, she had hidden a tape recorder under a bed while having intimacy with the president. The recording of their encounters was publicly played at the radio station of the University of the Philippines. And according to her, she was forced to publicize her love affair as protection since there were many threats to her life. On October 7th, 2013, Imelda Marcos declared a public televised interview with TV presenter Solita Monsad that Beams was innocent of her encounter with her husband. She revealed that Beams personally wrote a correspondence to her on April 10th, 1986 in Hawaii, asking forgiveness for being used by foreign American agents as a proxy spy to disrupt the physical health and political stability of her husband. Imelda Marcos also stated that she pitied Beams for being caught in the public scandal that ensued prior to her leaving the Philippines. Now, while she said that with America, Marcos now believed that America sabotaged the whole Philippines, and then they sent this woman to get the husband sick. They used these mistresses, quote unquote, to get the husband sick to make his health decline, like basically give him an illness to embarrass embarrass him, to expose him, so that he could lose his credibility among the people, because America had their own agenda. They blame America for a lot of their downfall, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, okay? According to reports by the Sydney Morning Herald, Marcos also had an affair with former Playboy model Evelyn Hegiesi around 1970 and had a child with her, Annalisa Josefa. In 1971, when Hegiesi was about to give birth to Annalisa, she was sent to Sydney, where Marcos had bought a splendid Point Pier mansion for the two to live in. Old friends of Evelyn had claimed her relationship with the dictator lasted up to 15 years, and that she would meet him a few times each year at a safe house in the exclusive gated community of Forbes Park in Manila, but they did not meet after he was forced to exile to Hawaii in 1986. Now, Imelda became an integral part of Ferdinand's political career. She used her charm and beauty to win over the public and was often seen at his side during rallies and events. As the years went by, she became not just a supportive spouse, but a powerful figure in her own right, exerting influence over various social and cultural initiatives. Crowds of working-class Filipinos came out in droves to Marcos' campaigns because they wanted to see the beautiful wife of Marcos. Marcos heavily relied on Imelda, eventually telling the press at one point that it was Imelda who had delivered the 1 million vote margin he needed to win the election.
Before, yung wives ng mga presidente, they were just housewives. They never meddled in the campaigning. They never bothered.
Imelda Marcos displayed matchless courage and complete equanimity, captivating the people everywhere with her engaging charm. Imelda Marcos was moving along with the presidential candidate, Mr. Marcos, in a grueling campaign throughout the Philippines. And if a few more thousand votes meant having to oblige with a song, she did.
A great deal of Marcos's victory owed to Imelda's appearances in the stage where she would sing.
But Imelda managed to get out into the smallest provinces and the corners of them and really meet people, and she made them feel very important. And the Marcoses had carefully cultivated an image of themselves as young, fresh talent that was going to help the country advance.
What is my role as First Lady? There was a crisis of identity. Who were we? Were we Japanese? Were we Americans? Were we Spanish? I built the cultural center of the Philippines to be the sanctuary of the Filipino soul.
Well, I was one of those who rallied against the building of the cultural center, basically because the cultural center is just one big building that tried to compete with the Lincoln Center and other first world edifices of centers of culture. The Philippines certainly is not first world and couldn't afford such a building.
Curtain rises, the cultural center, on September the 10th, 1969. It filled a real need, and it was widely successful.
During Ferdinand Marcos' first term, Imelda began doing the duties traditionally expected of a first lady, mostly social events and public appearances. The Marcos era, which began in 1965 when Ferdinand Marcos was elected president, was marked by both ambitious infrastructure projects and rampant corruption. Imelda was central to this dynamic, often seen as a glamorous face of the administration. But behind the glittering facade lay a darker reality, a political repression, human rights violations, and widespread corruption. In the first 3 years of being First Lady, she spent $1 million for the beautification of the Paco Park and $24 million for the beautification of Fort Santiago. In May 1966, Imelda pushed a 12 million peso plan to pull together the social welfare effort of several dozen social welfare groups. The term Edifice complex has been applied to Imelda and her penchant for grandiose public buildings, often constructed in impossibly short order. The cultural center of the Philippines complex is considered the premier symbol of Imelda's Edifice complex.
The cultural center, the heart center, the kidney center, the lung center. The opposition said she had an edifice complex. She decided that Manila would host the Manila International Film Festival to rival Cannes and Venice and then Toronto, that kind of thing. And they built a film palace in Manila, the Manila Film Center.
And because they were rushing it, they had shifts of people working on a 24-hour basis.
They were pouring cement after pouring second layers and third layers without waiting for the first layer to settle and harden. So it so happened that the scaffolding collapsed and about, between 18 to 36 bodies were buried there. But she said, well, they're there. They're encased in concrete. Finish it.
To this day, they say that those souls haunt the building because you have all these strange sounds.
One of the things that she did, which was quite impressive, She went against the Catholic Church and instituted a very strong population control program. She actually managed to lower the birth rate considerably.
For her, it was about personal power, not about leadership. Even her good works projects, like cleaning up Metro Manila, were just cosmetics.
In Ferdinand's diary preceding May, he wrote that he and Imelda were planning to wager all their power and wealth on a single throw of the dice of fate for the sake of the people and the republic. In 1972, Ferdinand declared martial law, citing the need to maintain order amid a growing communist insurgency. Ferdinand stated the purpose of the martial law was to create a new society with reformed institutions, no inequalities, corruption, or crime. Imelda called it martial law with a smile. This authoritarian rule led to the imprisonment of political opponents, suppression of dissent, and abuses by the military. Imelda was often accused of turning a blind eye to these atrocities or calling the hits herself, focusing instead on her lavish lifestyle and her grandiose projects, which includes the construction of the Cultural Center of the Philippines and the Philippine International Convention Center.
It is hard to judge exactly how popular he was because he completely dominated the scene through money. The 1969 elections, where my father challenged him for the presidency, Marcos at that time allegedly spent about $250 million to win the elections.
1969 was one of the dirtiest and most fraudulent elections we've ever had.
When Marcos declared martial law, it was the greatest time that I can remember in this country. Everybody had discipline. Everybody followed what they were told to do.
As of the 21st of this month, I signed Proclamation number 1081, placing the entire Philippines under martial law.
People will suspect, oh, he just proclaimed martial law to extend his stay in power. No, it was the risk of his honor and his reputation.
Marcos abolished both houses of Congress and placed the courts under his control, closed down all radio and television stations and all newspapers.
You know, when I proclaimed martial law, I didn't proclaim martial law alone. It is made to appear as if I just signed the decree and said, I impose martial law on each and every one of you. No, I asked the legislature to please pass a law proclaiming martial law because there was anarchy in the country. Now, let me say this. The opposition was strong, and they were members of the Security Council, and somehow they adopted the resolution which required that there be a unanimous vote for the armed forces to be able to move. And therefore, the armed forces was immobilized. At the same time, I asked the opposition party to come and join me in a coalition government. I offered one half of the cabinet. And of course, they laughed at me and said, why should we join you? We're going to take over the government. By the time you are through with the exercise, you're dead, politically and otherwise. And they refused to join me. I asked the advice of the judiciary. I asked the Supreme Court justices, the Court of Appeals justices, and the members of the private sector. And all of them told me, there's only one man who can proclaim martial law, and that is the president. And you are it. You are the only one who can proclaim martial law. This is why I must carry this particular mark in our history. I could not have transferred it to the legislature. Why? Because the legislature did not have the power. What does the Constitution provide? The president shall be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Philippines, and he may order the armed forces out to quell any disorder, riot, rebellion, invasion, insurrection, and in case of invasion, insurrection, rebellion, or imminent danger thereof, when the public safety requires it, he may suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus or proclaim martial law throughout the Philippines or any part thereof. What does that provision provide? It provides that only the president can proclaim martial law. I repeat, that is why I had to assume responsibility. And I am not one for shirking duty. The people said there was necessity for proclaiming martial law. And the people said, you are the only official who can proclaim martial law. So I proclaim martial law. And I sincerely believe that it was necessary to proclaim martial law to install order and stability because there was complete anarchy throughout the country at the time. They burned the Manila International Airport, they bombed the Supreme Court, they bombed the Constitutional Convention, they bombed the City Hall, they burned part of Malacañang Palace, they attempted to kidnap my children, they attempted to kill the president 8 times. There was, of course, an attempted assassination against the First Lady. You all know about that. And this required that I immediately act on it. And so I did. I have not deprived anybody of private property. On the contrary, while we are a free enterprise society, we have an egalitarian base. We recognize private property, encourage private initiative. And our Constitution explicitly recognizes the importance of developing the national economy and protecting the patrimony of the nation. In line with this, a National Economic and Development Authority has been created for the purpose of planning and coordinating economic development plans. I chair that economic development Commissioner.
An assassination attempt against Imelda Marcos occurred on December 7, 1972, when an assailant named Carlito de Mahilig, and forgive me for mispronunciations, tried to, take her out of here on live television with a bolo knife, but he was shot by the police. The motive appeared to have been her role in her husband's presidency, but human rights descendants believed it was staged by the government, which personally, after looking at all the evidence, I can agree as to how they came with that conclusion. Imelda was an actress above all, and the government of the Philippines was her stage. So people was like, even them the fake attempted assassination on live television was to get the people to feel a little softer and sorry for her because her husband had called for martial law.
We were giving awards, and suddenly there was a man with a dark suit and had a bolo. That fraction of a second, oh God, I said, if there's somebody who's going to kill me, why do they have to be bolo? It's so ugly. Why such an ugly instrument? And that I had all these 11 cuts. Eventually, there's one here. All of this was cut off. Maybe the Lord saved my life because I was pretty generous in the giving, in the serving, and the caring for my fellow men. From then on, it was my most productive years.
So she expanded the influence of her ministry. For example, in construction of roads, housing, environment, social welfare, etc. No?
Water, power, food, shelter, clothing, medical service, education, ecological balance, sports, recreation, livelihood programs, roads, bridges, communication, and the like. I built the Philippine Design Center.
These were not things for the everyday person. They didn't go. The people who she felt really loved her and said really loved her were not the people who attended symphonies and ballets or got special care at art centers.
And we know political parties do that all the time. If they want to win votes, they pretend there was this alleged assassination. In 1972, after the assassination of King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, Marcos wanted to extend the official condolences. Women were not welcome in the Saudi court, but Imelda, through her connection to the surgeon who previously performed heart surgery on the new king, managed to be the first woman guest to be honored. And she was a very, very intelligent woman that they always knew to send her to negotiate. Like she went to speak with Gaddafi and other dictators, It's just, she was very, very smart.
It doesn't surprise anyone who's seen her in action that she was the one sent out by my father for the more delicate trips.
For me, the most interesting trips were the ones to Libya, where we went to beard the lion in his den, who was Gaddafi.
Her purpose was basically to convince Gaddafi to stop shipping arms to the Muslim separatists in the Philippines.
It was Gaddafi who came to see me. And when he saw me, he said, Mrs. Marcos, I like you. Then he said, why don't you become Muslim? So I've been a Catholic all my life. I don't even know how to read the Quran. He said, I'll teach you. And he would underline, Islam is peace. And when the time came for the negotiations, there was argument about the ceasefire. So I said, Mr. President, but Islam is peace. And so I am coming here for peace, as you taught me in the Quran. Okay, said. So agreed. So that was my main mission. Women very often is not taken seriously. But Marcos was smart enough to know that If I made a mistake, he could always change his mind and he can be more flexible. The big, hardy leaders, oh, this is easy. Negotiation. And they kept their defenses down.
She did have a level of excess in Washington that was, to put it mildly, unusual. This was largely because she was viewed, rightly, as a figure of some influence and power in the Philippines. She was accountable to no one, including really not accountable to her husband.
She was very aggressive in pushing for a high-level set of meetings. And remember, she also had positions in her own right. She was the Minister of Human Settlements and Governor of Metro Manila. She controlled something like 15% of the budget.
Imelda Marcos is now one of the 10 richest women in the world. She denies ever wanting power, but the more she uses it, the more powerful she gets.
She had these bizarre all-night singing and dancing parties at Malacanang and on their yacht and in New York. She made people sit around watching these endless films of herself and the Pope.
She considered herself representative of the poor.
I seem to be able only to see the positive things in life. When I see, for instance, garbage or ugliness, so then I turn my back, or I seem to be able to skip it.
Throughout her travels, she became friends with Richard Nixon, Muammar Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Fidel Castro, and Joseph Broz Tito. She traveled to Iraq to secure oil and to Libya for a peace treaty. 6 months after martial law was lifted on January 17, 1981, Ferdinand Marcos was re-elected as president. While her husband began to suffer from lupus, Imelda effectively ruled in his place, so she became the ruler. On February 7, 1986, snap elections were held between Ferdinand Marcos and Corazon Aquino, the widow of Benigno Aquino Jr. Despite Ferdinand Marcos claiming to have won the election, allegations of vote rigging led to mass protests, later known as the People Power Revolution.
One of the leading opposition figures in the Philippines was murdered today, minutes after returning from 3 years in exile. Benigno Aquino was shot by a man posing as an airport worker.
He and Marcos had actually been of equal power for a long time. Because he was a threat to Marcos, precisely because he and Marcos were kind of equals. When Marcos declared martial law in 1972, he threw Ninoy in jail along with a number of other people. And then he needed a heart bypass operation in 1980, and Marcos allowed him to leave the country.
What would we have gained? Politically? Financially? Nothing.
The hatred, the anger towards the Marcos regime had built up to such an extent, people overcame their fears, started going out into the streets, and in such massive numbers that Marcos couldn't do a damn thing to stop it.
Well, the events has proven that we, the Marcoses, Ferdinand and Imelda, were the ultimate victims in the assassination of Aquino.
Corazon Aquino said she was content as the wife of opposition hero Benigno Aquino. But his assassination culminated in her unlikely candidacy.
Estimated 400,000 people in the Manila area could not find their names on the electoral register because they had mysteriously been removed.
The fraudulence of those elections was beyond belief.
The people of the Philippines saw 2 would-be presidents taking the oath of office this morning. The rival ceremonies were televised live.
The United States extends recognition to this new government.
The Americans. That was the downfall. We would never have been removed from the palace if not for the Americans.
I was to leave the palace now. All of these things were spread, paintings, jewelry galore, money so much because it was cash. I opened the vault. There were 40, 50 suitcases of Louis Vuitton jewelry. What did I take? Got diapers and bottles and milk for the kids. That's why in the custom it said, the Marcoses came in with diamonds in diapers and diamonds.
She had genuinely persuaded herself that Filipino people basically loved her so much that they would never resent what she was doing.
The people saw the things that I made for her.
And 3,000 pairs of shoes.
2,600 pairs of shoes.
2,200 pairs of shoes. 1,200
The
pairs
hundreds of
footwear.
shoes she had.
3,000 initially, and suddenly it became 1,000. Whatever is left has been asked by the Museum of Marikina. They have an Imelda Shoes Museum in Marikina.
She has to have a pair of shoes that goes with the dress, the color of the dress. Most of her shoes is from Beltrami, Ferragamo, Oleg Cassini, Bruno Magli. This is one of her favorite shoes.
After all, when they went to my closets, they found shoes, not skeletons. Marcos died in a state of shock. He couldn't believe it. because he so believed in America, and he always said, America is fair. To the very end, he could not believe America could do this to him. And so he did not last.
The cash and jewels carried to Hawaii are part of an estimated $1 billion in assets which Marcos, his family, and friends acquired through racketeering, fraud, and extortion. There was $1 million.
Millions and hundreds of millions of dollars were coming in contracts and aid. And you had coconut, sugar. And if they're getting pieces of all that, then that's a lot of money.
We were buying properties in New York to a place where we could anchor our economic development through free enterprise.
First, the Crown Building, about $101 million. The Herald Center, $60 million. 40 Wall Street, about $95 million. 200 Madison Avenue, around $60 million, I'm not sure.
So the grand plan was really to make the Philippines the trade center, the commercial center, the distribution center of the world.
The couple later emerged on the palace balcony in front of a loyalist group, and Imelda sang a song for the crowd. Later that day, Ferdinand Marcos finally agreed to step down and was given safe passage for him and his entire family to flee to Hawaii, United States. At midnight, February 26, 1986, the Marcos family fled the country to Hawaii with a party of about 80 individuals, the extended Marcos family, and a number of close associates and friends. Their arrival was controversial and soon led to Hawaii residents calling on the government to force the Marcoses to leave. The U.S. government initially hosted the exiles at Hickam Air Force Base, and Ferdinand and Imelda moved into a pair of residences in Maikiki Heights, Honolulu, a month later. Ferdinand Marcos eventually died in exile in September 1989. Now, one of the most scandalous aspects of Imelda Marcos' legacy is her staggering collection of shoes, over 3,000 pairs. When the Marcos family fled the Philippines in 1986, following a popular uprising known as the People Power Revolution, the world was shocked to discover the opulence they had hoarded. Press reports worldwide took note of her lavish wardrobe, said to include 15 mink coats, 508 gowns, 888 handbags, and 3,000 pairs of shoes. Some news reports estimated that there were up to 7,500 pairs, but Time magazine reported that the final tally was 1,060. The United States documented that the Marcos family entered the United States with millions of dollars in cash, stocks, jewelry, and gold kilobars inscribed to my husband on our 24th anniversary. The shoe became a cultural touchstone, even cited as a metaphor for the excesses of the Marcos regime. Critics mocked her obsession with fashion and luxury, while others view it as a symbol of the disconnect between the Marcos family and the struggles of the Filipino people. The iconic image of a closet overflowing with shoes became synonymous with the Marcos legacy, encapsulating the scandal and corruption that defined their rule.
It's more gold than people know about. It's over 1 million metric tons of gold.
The Marcoses, I will not name the spokesman.
Could you talk us through some of the paintings? Who's the
Madonna?
The Madonna, who's that artist?
That is a Michelangelo Madonna. I think
It's a Michelangelo.
Michelangelo Madonna.
And this one?
That's a Pizarro.
Pizarro. And then over here, this is a Picasso.
Yeah. This is a Gauguin.
This is Gauguin.
Yeah.
How did you manage to get so many extraordinary, lovely things?
Well, my husband was the lawyer of gold mines and also a gold trader. And he loved gold so much. It's hard to earn money honestly and properly, but harder still to spend money properly. You be the one to spend. And then I said, why? And then he said to me, because all you buy is beauty.
It sounds like a perfect relationship then. He earned the money.
Yes.
And you spent it.
Spent it, right. And I just did not leave it in gold. I bought paintings, beautiful jewelry, beautiful silver, anything beautiful.
But when President Marcos was acquiring all this money and giving it to you to spend, did you think it was his money, or did you look on it as money, the money of the Philippines people?
Oh, no. I knew it was his money because I saw this gold already in his home.
You were rich even before you became
He was rich.
leaders of the country.
He was rich. Oh, definitely.
And that has always been Imelda's line.
Yes.
Her husband, Ferdinand Marcos, was a staggeringly successful investor in gold who made billions.
Nila Polo Club over there.
We didn't use the Filipino treasury as our own personal cash machine. And if you think we did, prove it. And so far, despite hundreds of court cases, no one really has.
So Madame Marcos and I went to Cartier one day. They took us into a sealed off room and they wheeled in these gigantic trays, and they were one after the other. One had emeralds, one had diamonds, one had rubies. She bought more jewelry than I think they sold in 10 years. But the most opulent thing that I ever saw was in her bedroom at the Waldorf. She had 100 strands of pearls from white to black from the floor all the way around the head post, all the way around, and then on the floor. I said, Madame Marcos, why do you carry all these pearls with you? She said, they bring us luck. When they got deposed and they went to Hawaii, Madame Marcos wanted me to come over there after the president died and be with her when they exhumed the body and took it back to the Philippines. And I checked with the government and they said that I would be deported, and I had nothing to wear to be deported in.
Now, there was a lawsuit and she did have to go and face a jury in New York, but she kind of got off of that too and won over the people. They loved her. She was older. She cried a lot during court. She even fainted a couple of times. And one thing I saw under a lot of comments when I was watching this clip from a documentary is one of the black jurors, Llewellyn White, I believe his name is, that he loved her. He loved her so much. She gave him a picture of herself because he was one of the jurors that, sided with her. And she had a thing with calling black people Negroes, which was pretty odd because it was the 90s. Like, you didn't do that. But she had a thing. She called black people Negroes, and she said she loved them and they loved her. And yeah, a lot of them did cape for her because it was like, they didn't care for the government. Tell me what you guys think about this.
Of course, the end of my anonymity was really the trial in New York, one of the trials of the century.
She and her late husband looted more than $160 million from the Philippines Treasury, invested the money in New York real estate, and defrauded American banks along the way.
When they see me in the streets and the Negroes or people in New York, they say, "Yo, mama," and they immediately recognize it.
She cried often in the courtroom. One or two occasions she had passed out, fainted. The trial was really about Mr. Marcos and Mr. Marcos doing, not Mrs. Marcos so much. I was not convinced that she knew where the money was coming from. One of the points that some of the jurors were laboring was the fact that when she came here, she had these lavish parties, but I see it as part of her job as the president's wife.
The jury's verdict, innocent of racketeering, innocent on all counts.
We do the same thing in this country. White House has parties all the time. So we can't say because it's a poor country, they should not live up to certain standards when they come to America. I think they should. This picture was sent to me by, of course, Miss Marcos. To dearest Llewellyn White, my deepest appreciation for your lifetime birthday gift to be truth. And signed Imelda Marcos. And I think I must have given her a picture of me. From in the military. It's quite a picture.
Now, the controversy surrounding the Marcos family didn't end with their ousting from power. Corruption allegations swirled around them, with estimates suggesting that the Marcoses took off billions of dollars from the Philippine treasury. Imelda and Ferdinand was accused of embezzlement, money laundering, and plundering the nation's wealth. After her return from exile, Imelda returned to politics. In 1992, Imelda ran for president in the 1992 Philippine presidential election, finishing 5th out of 7 candidates. She was elected as a congresswoman of Leyte during the 1995 Philippine general election, representing the 1st District. And despite facing a disqualification lawsuit in which the Supreme Court ruled in her favor, even after the fall of the Marcos regime, Imelda's life remained entangled in scandal. In the 1990s, she faced faced numerous grave cases, though she was often acquitted or had her sentences overturned. Her children, particularly Aimee Marcos and Bongbong Marcos, also found themselves in the spotlight with their own political aspirations and controversies. The Marcos family attempts to regain political power in recent years have sparked debates and wow, the Filipino people are really forgiving.
Alam ko kahit napatay na si Marcos, alam ko siya ay maligayang maligaya sapagkat ang kanyang diwang makadiyos, makabayan, makatao ay buhay muli sa kanyang anak, si Ferdinand II, na ngayong kandidato para gobernador, at ngayon si Aimee, kandidata para congresswoman representative in the same district of Ferdinand Marcos. You can feel yourself being born again, their father and their mother in these children. It's a very, very overwhelming feeling.
I'm not an apologist for political dynasties by any means. Sa akin, data ko lang ang political dynasties. Hindi ko alam ba tumatak si Bong? Hindi. Hindi mo sinabi sa akin. Hindi, actually, ang katotohanan talaga,
This is about mommy. Louder.
Sa aking pananaw, wala pa akong nakitang kasing galing na. She's one of the best. She's one of the best politicians I know.
A landslide victory, not only for Ferdinand Marcos II to become governor of Ilocos Norte, but also Maria Imelda Marcos to become the congresswoman. This was just a miracle.
Only evil complicates. My life has been complicated by everyone, including my family, maybe, and my friends, some of my so-called friends. I'm very simple. I don't know why they make a problem of me, really. I am at peace with my conscience and my creator. I can always say, when the time comes for the creator for me to take me, and he will say, what have you done with your life, Imelda? And I'll say, Lord, this is what you've gave me, and this is the life you gave me, and this is what I have done with my life. And I'm sure the Lord will embrace me and give me a big smile and bring me to heaven and to eternity. I am sure of that.
In November 2006, Marcos started her own business, a fashion label, Imelda Collection, including jewelry, clothing, and shoes with the help of her daughter. After enjoying the backing of the 5 U.S. presidents and the close friendship of Ronald and Nancy Reagan, with whom she shared an interest in astrology, the shock of America turning on her was profound. The United States played a significant role in the Marcos regime initially. The U.S. supported Ferdinand Marcos as a staunch ally during the Cold War, viewing him as a bulwark against communism in Southeast Asia. American military and economic aid flowed into the Philippines, allowing the Marcos regime to tighten its grip on power. However, as human rights abuses became more apparent, U.S. support waned.
When Marcos took over in 1966, he looked pretty damn good to Lyndon Johnson.
On a rainy day in Washington, pomp and ceremony attend the formal reception of Philippine President Ferdinand E. Marcos and his wife.
He was one of the Democrats of Asia when there were very few at that time.
Before we gained independence in 1946, we had to sign a military basing agreement with them. He knew what the Americans wanted, and he tested how far he could push the envelope on his relationship with them, which he did. The Americans had always been involved in Philippine politics. Remember, we were a colony for about 45 years. It's the largest bases outside the continental U.S., larger than Pearl Harbor. He knew how to play the bases card very, very well, which he did. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, did he get a lot of money from the Americans in return.
However, as human rights abuses became more apparent, U.S. support started to dwindle. By the time of the People Power Revolution in 1986, the U.S. had shifted its stance, advising Marcos to step down. It was a dramatic turn of events that underscored the complexities of international relations where former allies became critics overnight. Imelda, though a Catholic all her life, has shown signs that she is into the occult and esoteric beliefs and practices.
Well, it's very esoteric, existential philosophy, really. And a face that is happy always looks like a heart. A sad face is an upside-down heart. But put this together, it's the symbol for peace. 7 portals to peace and order. You have a tree, the cosmos, man, cross, and then the star. Man, cross, star, upright heart, which is peace and order, or infinity. Then you have creator. We have so many gods, but there's only one creator. The bite, the apple, Adam and Eve, the computer.
She talked to me for 4 hours. 4 hours straight. I did not say a word.
It is not expensive to be beautiful. It takes only a little effort to be presentable and beautiful. People think of beauty as luxury, beauty as frivolity. No, or extravagance. Beauty is a discipline. I have to be a star for these poor people. At the same time, I have to be slave. I have to enslave myself that everybody becomes a star.
Imelda had this thing about looking beautiful because she said that she was representing the people. It sounded to me so convoluted because she was representing a people who were so unglamorous, so unfree.
And everything was happening underneath. People were suffering. There was tremendous poverty. There was tremendous violence all over the place. Not just some kind of invisible reality.
She's a very interesting character indeed. What do you guys think about that? Imelda Marcos remains a polarizing figure in Philippine history. Some view her as a glamorous icon, a symbol of beauty and power, while others see her as a representation of corruption and excess. Her life has been a roller coaster of highs and lows, a mix of elegance and scandal that continues to fascinate and infuriate Filipinos and the world alike. And I have a question to end this, like I asked in my Dragon Lady video. It's funny how if you're not a third world country, like you're not running a third world country, there's so many limitations set by America. You know, America loves to meddle. So it was like with our Dragon Lady video in Haiti, how, yeah, you couldn't have a lavish party, you couldn't have nice clothes or, you know, travel in your own jet if you were a president. You had to be like poor and humble as a people, right? And if you did the opposite, America would come and stir the people against you. And that happened in the Philippines. But in America, there's grand balls that are made. Presidents have their own chefs. They have, you know, vacation time. They can go play golf wherever, you know, and they wear lavish clothes. They're not wearing like clothes from Shein, you know, like let's be for real. But no one really bats an eye. And people can say, well, they have a budget for that. Trust me, the budget the president's getting paid does not equal their lifestyle. So why? And they're making a lot more money, especially if you understand how lobbying works and stuff like that, and who has presidents in their pockets. The whole system is corrupt in general. But why do we as people tend to clock others that are in third world countries as if they couldn't get it? I think that's why a lot of people had sympathy for Imelda, because it was like, wait, she wasn't doing anything different than what everybody else was doing. It's just they didn't want her in power anymore. But then there was a lot of Filipinos that did struggle, that did have their loved ones die, etc. And there was a lot of corruption. But it goes again, it's all corrupt. And none of them really gets held accountable unless someone else who's more powerful and more corrupt comes along and take them out of here, you know? It's just a question I saw a lot, and I'm curious to see you guys respond to that. How would you respond to that? How would you respond to that? But comment below. Her story is very, very interesting. Comment below your thoughts. I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in. I will see you in the next one.